Hello, good people of YouTube. Mountbatten here. Today, actually Saturday, I released a video talking about my first impressions of submarines in random battles after they've been through several iterations of closed testing, their own special rank mode, their own special mode altogether, this, that, and the other, and what it's like to play submarines and play against submarines in random battles right now. And in that video, I downplayed the over-the-top reactions to submarines being in random battles now that has been going through the community, and trying to take a more realistic approach and talk about what it's really like to play them and such in random battles. And let's just say that was an interesting comment section. A whole lot of viewers wanted to just rant and rave about submarines and their downsides and how badly they affect the game, which sure, if you guys want to talk about that, I'm more than willing to do that, and that's what we're going to do today. We'll talk about my biggest issues with submarines and how they are currently negatively impacting the game, and we're going to look at it in a bit more detail than what I talked about on Saturday, and some other things that I've brought up, and also some potential fixes to this that could be pretty simple to implement. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. So currently my biggest issue with submarines by far is the homing and the pinging. So let's start with the homing, shall we? So first off, homing. If you do not know how submarines work in World of Warships, you have, well, your submarine, and on either the bow or stern on your submarine, well, actually on bow and stern for every submarine except for the U-2501, you have torpedo tubes. And the way submarine torpedo tubes work in World of Warships is that in order to hit the target, you launch your torpedoes, and you can launch them unguided if you want to, but you have homing. The homing works by pinging the target, so you click the right mouse when you have the ping selected, which is the one key on the keyboard. The ping travels toward the target at a certain speed that's different for each nation and hits the target. Depending upon where you hit the target, the torpedoes will now try to track the target and try to hit it in that location. Now, the surface ship can see what side and what part of their ship has been pinged. They also get an indicator of where the ping came from. So now the surface ship roughly knows where the ping is coming from. So they also know generally where the submarine is sitting at least when they get pinged. Then the torpedoes will track that for a certain amount of time. The ping has a certain duration to it. In order to refresh it, you either have to ping another part of the ship or ping that same part again. If you ping that same part again, you've activated the double ping. Now the torpedoes will track the target much harder, and they will lose their tracking a lot closer to the target. And they will now do citadel damage and ignore torpedo protection, which means you're essentially doubling the amount of damage you're going to be doing to the ship. And there are commander skills where you can increase this damage when you have a double ping even further. So the distance at which the torpedoes cut off is different for each class. Now, my main issue is the double ping distance. Now, for battleships, this isn't an issue really in terms of the distance, because battleship homing cuts off at 2.1 kilometers no matter what. Single ping, double ping, doesn't matter. However, looking at cruisers and destroyers, both of those cut off much, much closer. With the cruisers, it's around 360, 370 meters. With DDs, it's even closer, I believe, around 200 meters. Which, for reference in the game scale, that's almost nothing. It takes about 300 meters for ship-launched torpedoes to arm. So if you want to get a good idea of what this range is like, take whatever cruiser or DD that you have, or battleship with torps, into a battle, click the 3 in that area of the ocean that's not highlighted green, which indicates your torp angles. That is roughly 300 meters. So that's roughly where the torpedoes will stop homing if you double ping a cruiser or a destroyer. With a destroyer, again, it's actually a bit closer than that. So that's not a lot of wiggle room. Now, is that guaranteeing a torpedo hit every time you get a double ping? No. You can maneuver to dodge the torpedoes, but it's pretty tricky to do. And when we're talking about cruisers especially, we have cruisers with 10-second rudder shift times all the way down to cruisers with 3-second rudder shift times, depending upon how you build it, of course. So you have some cruisers that this may not be a huge issue for them, but then you have some other cruisers where they simply are not this maneuverable to dodge torpedoes that are homing at them up until this point. So that's a huge issue for me right there. Just the cruisers having the same homing parameters, despite, again, there being so many different cruisers in the game with so many different rudder shift times and degrees of maneuverability. The cruiser class is one of the most diverse classes in the game. We have basically large DDs with the Atlanta, up to small battleships with the Stalingrad in the same class. So, in my opinion, they need to divide that up by either rudder shift time or classification of cruisers in terms of that homing. Now, you can pop damage control to clear the ping. And on cruisers and destroyers, damage control is slightly less important because fires are shorter and such. And plus, if you've got like 3+ fires on your cruiser, your destroyer, something's gone sideways in your situation. And plus, a good chunk of cruisers and DDs run last stand to where they don't even need to pop their damage con unless something really, really, really bad happens, like half the crap on their ship got blown off, which can happen if you're fighting like a British battleship or such. But it still takes much longer to cool down than for the submarine's torpedoes to reload. Damage con, again, depending upon what class you're playing and what nation it is and such, it could be anywhere from 40 seconds to well over a minute and change for that to come off a cooldown. All the submarines right now have a sub 1 minute reload on their torps, and they don't have to fire all their torps. Submarines can launch 1 or 2 torps at a time, which if you get a double ping on a cruiser is probably more than enough to completely blow them out the water, because at that point, they're ignoring torpedo protection, they're doing citadel damage, and with the damage that these torps can do now, and especially if you add that commander skill on top of that increases the damage by another 15%, again, that's enough to blow a few light and medium cruisers out of the water with just 2 or 3 torpedoes. Pings also don't cost the submarine player anything. They don't increase the detection range of the subs, nor do they drain resources from the subs. So sub players can just ping away to their heart's content, which you're seeing me do in the background right now. And if it does do something to increase the range or decrease your dive time, it's not noticeable because I paid attention and it seems like nothing's changed. And the thing is too, we've gone through 6 or 7 iterations of this, and then some of them they did, some of them they didn't, and it's hard to keep track, but it seems like at least in this iteration there's nothing to discourage the submarine player from just pinging constantly. So on one side you have their surface ships, which they pretty much, in order to dodge these torpedoes, they have to literally drop whatever they're doing, turn hard over, pay attention to the direction that the torps are coming from. Do they have a single ping or a double ping on them? And, what part of the ship are they coming at? And how am I going to have to maneuver this? At what point's the best point to pop damage con to stop the homing? Which really, you turn hard, get those torpedoes turning hard, stop the damage con, the torpedoes are going to keep going straight, you're going to keep turning, and they're going to miss. But then, before your damage con can come off cooldown, there's going to be another set of torpedoes coming in your direction from the submarine, and of course she's going to be pinging you this entire time too. So speaking of the double ping, citadel torpedoes are just too much. This is my other main issue with subs right now. With the double ping mechanic enabled, torpedoes, like I've said, ignore torpedo protection. This by itself with the current system would net around, depending upon what tier you're playing, anywhere from between 40,000 to 60,000 per salvo without doing citadel damage. That is if you hit all of your torpedoes, which some situations that's easy to do, some situations that's not that easy to do, but you'll still probably nick them with 1 or 2. With a double ping is still devastating damage. Adding citadel damage on top of that is excessive because so little of that can be repaired unless you have a special repair party like the British, the Austin, or a handful of other ships in the game. Honestly, every other mechanic around submarines I do believe is fine. The diving mechanics, their survivability, detectability, etc., etc., etc. They've gone through several phases of testing and versions, but I do believe the current one that we have right now is the best one in terms of everything else except for the homing and the ping and the citadel torps. Those are the only major glaring issues that I have with subs at this moment. So how do we fix this? Well, there's about 4 to 5 things that I think could be added to subs right now or added to surface ships that would fix this. So, my first proposed fix. Give cruisers and DDs noisemakers. We have homing torps that were mostly experimental during World War II. They saw very limited usage by the Germans and a little bit by the Americans. Why not give surface ships noisemakers? In fact, the British during World War II created a device called Foxer to do just this. In fact, it created a sound that was 100 times louder than the cavitation from the ship's prop. Now, in real life, it was towed behind a ship. It could only go about 14 knots when being used, but it was very, very, very loud and threw off the Germans' torps. But in-game, we could deploy these in a way similar to depth charges. Now, I'm saying, does it have to be the Foxer device? No, there were several other devices that were thought of around this time that they could add into the game. I mean, why not? So they could be working like depth charges and be active for a set period of time, anywhere from 10 to 20 seconds, maybe depending upon the tier, and confuse the torps. The effect could also range from slightly weakening the homing to causing the torpedoes to completely lose lock, depending upon how close the torps pass to the noisemaker. So, this gives the submarine player a fair chance of saying, hey, we know that these noisemakers are deployed off the rear end of the ship, so I have to position myself in such a way to where my torpedoes won't be homing in toward the stern of the ship. It also gives the surface ship player a way of saying, I've been pinged. Maybe if I deploy these noisemakers and, let's say in a wide pattern far away from my ship or in a very close-in pattern close to my ship, I can, kind of give myself a better chance of survival. So it adds another pretty interesting and I would think pretty fun mechanic to try and throw off these torps. And again, like with the sub player, it's no big deal if they miss one salvo because they've got, another full rack of torpedoes coming up in under a minute. So I don't think it would be devastating to the damage numbers that the submarines are bringing in. Now, another one which actually existed at one point in time is a penalty to ping spamming. So the ability for a sub to simply not care about pinging is unbalanced. Each ping should do one of the following, in my opinion. 1, slightly increase the detection range of the sub out to a certain point. Or 2, slightly drain a battery reserve, either a battery set aside just for the ping or the dive time of the sub. This way the subs can't just ping to their heart's content. And like I just said, similar mechanics have existed in previous tests, so we know that they already have this whole mechanic laid out. It would be fairly simple, I believe at least, to reintroduce them. And I'm not saying it has to be the battery that's tied to the ship's dive time. You can have a battery that's just for the ping. I mean, active pinging costs a lot of energy. So it would make sense that there would be battery banks, in-game set aside just for this. And it could, be enough for, let's say, 10 or so pings at one time. But after that, you got to wait, let's say, until it's at least halfway filled again to start pinging again. Makes sense. That would be one way to do it. The other way is, again, simply to just decrease the detection range of the submarine out to a certain point. Pings are loud. I've played this clip right here. Brace your ears. Several times when I discuss submarines. That submarine's probably 20 miles away from where those guys are diving at, and it still sounds clear as day. So it makes sense that if you're continuously, actively pinging a target, that your detection range would go up. Now, does it have to go all the way out to the range of the torpedoes? No, it could be simply double the detection range of the ship on the surface, which would be like 10 kilometers for most of the subs, because most of them have like a 5.5-ish kilometer range, the detection range in there somewhere, if you build for it. So that would be one way, I think, to solve this problem. That way, if you're constantly getting pinged, you can either scoot in a little closer to where the pingings come from and spot the submarine, and now you have your ASW planes or your teammate with depth charges or whatever can really start to lay into the submarine at that point. Just to chill out with the ping spamming, because it is honestly way too much in my opinion. Now, the next fix has 2 fixes in it. So this is Damage Con. Damage Con is simply overloaded at this point. The CV rework began this with the ability for CVs to simply keep striking ships with either HE bombs or torpedoes over and over and over, and rockets over and over and over again in a single flight. Then we got to, well, where I like to call the pinnacle of HE spam, when we kept seeing more and more HE spam ships being added to the game, and now with the Pan-Asian line, we're getting another line of that. Now, homing torps has just pushed it over the edge. Decreasing the cooldown time of damage con would help to alleviate this. By how much? I don't know, maybe about 10 seconds, 20 seconds, maybe add in a commander skill that cuts it down by like 50% or something like that to allow players to build into this if they want to build into like their ASW survivability, their submarine survivability, or build into their ASW capabilities. Or add in degaussing. Degaussing is a real-life method used to disable magnetic triggers. Magnetic triggers were used a lot during World War II in magnetic mines. This was invented to counter that. What it does is reverse the polarity of the ship's hull, or no, it doesn't do that. That's something from freaking Star Trek. I'm not a scientist, but what it does is it makes the magnetic signature of the ship's hull match that of the sea water around it. That way, the magnetic fuses on the mines wouldn't go off when the ship was passing through a minefield. That could be added into the game as a separate consumable. It would work just like Damage Con works, meaning that you have either an unlimited number of charges of it, or you have a limited number of charges of it. You pop it, it's active for 10 seconds, 20 seconds, however long that it would be set for. It runs out, it goes on cooldown. That way now you don't have to hold your Damage Con for those torpedoes coming in at you, or hold it for the 3 fires on your ship that may become 4 fires because you're being HE spammed. It gives you more flexibility with trying to counter subs. Now, obviously, if degaussing would be added in, damage con would no longer clear the ping. So it's not like you have 2 consumables that could clear the ping. You would have one, but just be dedicated for that right there. And if they add in something else, some other type of homing weapon in the game, maybe a torpedo that flies through the air, like missiles, it could be the counter to that as well. It's really interesting if you go dig into the history of missiles and World Warships. Who knows what's going to come next. I believe these changes would help relieve a large amount of the frustration that the community is having right now with subs, while also bringing about better balance to the interaction of submarines versus surface ships. But we do have to face the truth. Subs are more than likely here to stay, despite a large part of the community not wanting them at all. Rather than be completely negative all the time, I like to look at what could potentially fix these issues, and also look at the positives that a whole new class could bring to the game. It is more content at the end of the day for what is a free-to-play game. Plus, let's not forget that they are still in testing and probably will have more changes brought to them in the future. So that's my spiel about that. That's the major issues I see with submarines right now. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. And from what I read on not just the comments to my Saturday video, but around Reddit, around the forums and other YouTube videos and such, this does seem to be the most legit criticisms of the class that isn't just people going full-on against submarines. And I do think these are major issues that really need to be addressed. And if they can knock this down and find a balance for the homing mechanic and the pinging, I think we'll have a pretty darn good class added to the game that adds in some really cool battles against submarines. It's a lot of fun when you're being sneaky and trying to get past the line. And I'm sure the first videos played already where I was sneaking down the middle, I got detected, I had to crash dive down deep, I'm running for my freaking life from a Holland and from 2 or 3 ships airstriking me, and I don't know what's around me. I'm having to risk it surfacing, and my risk pays off, and I find myself behind the enemy team's lines, and I have the perfect buffet of ships in front of me to sink. Now, we didn't wind up winning the match, but it was a very rewarding experience and a lot of fun. And it's a cool another whole plane of an underwater world that's been added to the game that I would like to see balanced a bit better to, again, account for these issues. And hopefully once these ships get to a well-balanced place, hopefully if that happens, then everyone can get to enjoying them. And of course, a lot of the frustration too is trying to adapt to this in the first place. It's a completely new class, and there's going to be growing pains for sure. Anyway, guys, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Are these the issues that you agree with most often? What else are you seeing pop up that you think needs to be addressed? Let me know down below. Hope you guys are having a wonderful Monday and have a wonderful week. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel. We're on our way to 30,000 subs. And we passed 29,100 a few days ago, and I cannot thank you guys enough for that. Hope you guys have a wonderful week. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.